The 9,874th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of the Syrian Arab Republic and Turkey to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2025/127, a letter dated 27 February 2025 from the Secretary General addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I thank Council members for the opportunity to brief you once again on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2118 on the elimination of the chemical weapons program of the Syrian Arab Republic. Since the last consideration of this matter by the Council, and consistent with established practice, the Office for Disarmament Affairs has been in regular contact with its counterparts in the OPCW Technical Secretariat on activities related to the implementation of Resolution 2118. I spoke to Director General Arias on 28th of February and received full briefing, and I also had a pleasure of meeting with Ambassador Alda Haq of Syria on 3rd of March. Madam President, since the Council's previous meeting on this matter, and as we all know, a new political reality has emerged in Syria. As the Secretary General has emphasized, the people of Syria are now facing an historic opportunity to build a stable and peaceful future for the Syrian people after 14 years of brutal war. As part of such stable and peaceful future, the new reality also presents an opportunity to obtain long overdue clarifications on the full extent and scope of the Syrian chemical weapons program, to rid the country of all chemical weapons, to normalize relations with the OPCW, and to ensure long-term compliance with the Chemical Weapons Convention. Syria has started to take its steps towards this objective. Madam President, the importance of closing all outstanding issues related to Syria's chemical weapons dossier cannot be overstated. As I reported before, the previous Syrian authorities submitted 20 amendments to the Syrian Arab Republic's initial declaration. However, OPCW Declaration Assessment Team, or DAT, was never able to confirm that the declaration submitted was accurate and complete because of the insufficient and inaccurate information it contained. Over the last 11 years, the DAT has raised and reported a total of 26 outstanding issues with Syria's declaration, of which 19 remain unresolved. The OPCW Technical Secretariat has reported that the substance of the 19 outstanding issues remains a serious concern, as it involves large quantities of potentially undeclared or unverified chemical warfare agents and chemical munitions. In addition, the OPCW Fact-Finding Mission, or FFM, and the OPCW Investigation and Identification Team, IIT, have documented the use of chemical weapons in Syria and, in a number of incidents, identified the Syrian Arab armed forces as the perpetrators. Thus, the OPCW Technical Secretariat has reported that it is undeniable that the previous authorities in Syria did not declare the full extent of the Syrian chemical weapons program, and that they continue to use and possibly produce chemical weapons after joining the Chemical Weapons Convention in 2013. Madam President, the situation left by the previous Syrian authorities is extremely worrying. Therefore, I am encouraged that the new authorities have expressed their desire and commitment to embark on a new chapter of cooperation with the OPCW to close the outstanding issues. On 8th of February, the OPCW Director General and a high-level delegation from the OPCW Technical Secretariat visited Damascus at the invitation of the caretaker Foreign Minister Assad Hassan al-Shaibani. During this visit, the Director General also met with Mr. Ahmed Hussein al-Shara, who gave assurances of the new authorities' intent to cooperate with the OPCW. Following the visit, I was informed that on 21st February, the Director General received a letter from the caretaker Foreign Minister with the appointment of a focal point for chemical weapons matters within the ministry. Shortly thereafter, the focal point official traveled to The Hague for in-person meetings with the OPCW Technical Secretariat on how to advance the OPCW's 9-point action plan for Syria. I am further encouraged by the statement made by the caretaker Foreign Minister on Wednesday at this week's session of the OPCW Executive Council, in which he emphasized the new authorities' commitment to destroying any remains of the chemical weapons program developed under the previous authorities, bringing justice to the victims, and ensure Syria's compliance with international law. I am pleased to note that as a result of the renewed commitment, the new Syrian authorities and the OPCW Technical Secretariat have already begun to work towards these goals. In the coming days, a team of technical experts from the OPCW Technical Secretariat will be deployed to Damascus to work on establishing the OPCW's permanent physical presence in Syria and start jointly planning deployments to chemical weapons sites. Madam President, the OPCW Technical Secretariat remains fully committed to implementing its mandate aimed at verifying the fulfillment of the Syrian Arab Republic's declaration obligations under the Convention, decisions by OPCW policymaking organs, and the Security Council resolutions. Furthermore, the commitment of the caretaker authorities in Syria to fully and transparently cooperate with the OPCW Technical Secretariat is commendable. That said, the work ahead will not be easy. The new reality, while presenting an opportunity to chart a new course for Syria, also presents significant challenges amidst significant humanitarian, security, and recovery needs in the country. In order to accomplish all the tasks needed to rid Syria of all chemical weapons, the OPCW Technical Secretariat and the new authorities in Syria will require strong support and additional resources from the international community. Madam President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I urge the members of this Council to unite and show leadership in providing that support that these unprecedented efforts will require. This is a priority action directly addressing the future security of Syria, states in the region, as well as the global community. The United Nations stands ready to provide support however we can and will continue to do our part to uphold the norm against the use of chemical weapons, anywhere, at any time. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Ms. Nakamitsu for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, High Representative Izumi Nakamitsu. Your testimony highlights the gravity of the situation facing the Syrian people. President Trump responded to the Assad regime's barbaric use of chemical weapons against innocent civilians in Syria with military strikes in 2017, and then again in 2018 with our allies, France and the United Kingdom. This is how to achieve peace through strength. Madam President, we have an historic opportunity to close this dark chapter in history and to start a new one, creating a Syria that is safer for its people and more secure for the region and the world. All elements of the Assad regime's chemical weapons program must now be secured, declared, and safely destroyed under international verification. This imperative is twofold: to bring Syria into compliance with its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention, and, critically, to ensure that any remaining elements do not end up in the wrong hands. The window of opportunity is short. All stakeholders need to act quickly to facilitate the work of the OPCW. The United States welcomes the initial positive steps taken by the OPCW and the interim Syrian authorities. We are encouraged that, as the High Representative just noted, following OPCW Director General Arias's historic visit to Damascus, the Syrian interim authorities named a focal point for chemical weapons in order to commence this work. The OPCW has a tremendously important mission before it, one that contributes directly to global security and one that requires support from all. And we in this council have a responsibility to finish what we started back in 2013 when the council adopted Resolution 2118 with the aim of eliminating Syria's chemical weapons program and holding those responsible for use of chemical weapons to account. We must remain seized of this critical matter until the work is done. We all seek to achieve a world free of chemical weapons. Achieving this goal will help us in our pursuit of peace in the region and around the world. Let us move one step closer by supporting the OPCW as it assumes this vital role in Syria. I thank you.
And I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, President. We'd like to thank the High Representative for Development Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, for her briefing. We paid particular attention to the contents of the monthly report of OPCW DG, Mr. Fernando Arias. It contained passages following his trip to Damascus in February of this year, the goal being to ensure fully-fledged resumption of the Declaration Assessment Team under the CWC and in this CAR. On the whole, we support any progress which would help resolve the remaining outstanding issues in Syria's initial declaration, on the understanding that the Technical Secretariat, the TS leadership, and the states parties to the convention will ensure a depoliticized, impartial, and professional approach to closing this Syrian chemical dossier. We stand ready to cooperate constructively to close the aforementioned file. We're all well aware that it's thanks to the Russian Federation that Syria acceded to the CWC in 2013, placing its chemical arsenal under international control. And yet we're not going to play along with attempts to politicize this issue. We're not going to level groundless accusations at the former government, nor will we advertise this topic through fakes. On this issue, we cannot accept any artificial urgencies, nor is it appropriate to settle scores on the pretext of trying to close this chemicals dossier. Unfortunately, we still harbour founded doubts about the OPCW's ability to exercise its strictly technical duties in good faith, owing to politicization of its work that was off the charts for many years. More evidence of this situation is the, to put it lightly, contentious language contained in the report under discussion today. According to this language, the current political situation in Syria supposedly fosters the Technical Secretariat of the OPCW getting maximum volume and scope of information about the military chemical program in Syria. First, such assessments go far beyond the mandate of the OPCW Technical Secretariat. Second, it's not clear what new or additional inspections at sites or what further evidence gathering in the field is being referred to when Syria has been subjected to bombing on several occasions. Just think about the assertions of the French president in April 2018 about the destruction of Syrian chemical weapons storage and production sites. Such a take on what needs to be done lost all meaning when Israel conducted massive strikes 3 months ago. Over the last 3 months, aimed at complete destruction of any ability to trace Syria's military defense capabilities. Under these conditions, it's hard to be sure that the deployment of a fully fledged OPCW mission in Syria will not boil down to advertising at the West's behest, yet further provocations and blatant accusations of chemical weapons use and concealment of Syria's military chemicals program. We want to warn you right away, given the TS's methods and practices of establishing illegitimate structures under its auspices, which we've seen over the last few years, any conclusions that such missions would draw won't enjoy the trust of the international community. Against this backdrop, we're concerned by the Secretariat's statements, the TS's statements about supposedly impediments being waged by the former government to the work of the OPCW in the country. They are inappropriate because it is the TS leadership that refused to meet with the head of the Syrian National Authority on the CWC in Damascus. Such a meeting could have helped settle such contentious issues. Despite the fact that, despite the political context, we shouldn't forget that the Syrians, from the very moment they joined the convention, were very open and ready to cooperate with the OPCW. But the OPCW didn't take up this offer. In Syria, as far as we're aware, there's no one that they can talk to professionally because those who were in charge of working with the OPCW are no longer there. Furthermore, work on the Syrian chemicals dossier under these new conditions should happen with due regard for many instances of toxical chemicals being used and other warfare agents being used by radical and extremist groups, including ISIS. The latter have the technological and production capacities to synthesize various chemicals prohibited under the CWC, as evidenced by UNITAD reports and a number of objective assessments of the fact-finding mission. Specifically, I'm referring to episodes in Morea on the 1st and 3rd of September 2015. In light of the above, we note that the Syrian chemicals dossier in the current environment, despite assertions of the OPCW DG about supposedly conditions being conducive to swiftly closing this file, well, it seems to be a confused formula with many variables. Let me repeat what I said. The Technical Secretariat has tarnished its reputation in the eyes of the entire developing world, owing to its inappropriate political games and machinations. The situation is complicated, is going to get more complicated if there are further groundless accusations leveled at the former Syrian government. Under such conditions, we recommend insistently to Mr. Arias and to his team to focus their efforts on investigating existing data and facts and then on conducting a professional investigation so as to close and resolve outstanding issues. We call on our colleagues on the Security Council, when adopting approaches to discussions of the Syrian chemicals file, to fully take into consideration the specificities of the domestic political situation in Syria. Syria is currently confronting a number of existential issues: the need to maintain its sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and unity, as well as to ensure national reconciliation, to create new state structures, to prepare for and hold general elections, and to return to the state the monopoly of the use of force in addition to addressing threats from terrorist groups. Over the last few days, we've heard very worrying news from Syria, which show that we're very far off a stabilization of the situation in the country. Clear, under such conditions, verifying information about whether there are chemical weapons or there aren't any is not the top priority for the current authorities. We need to understand this and not to push ahead with this topic. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement, and I give the floor now to Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. We would like to thank High Representative Izumi Nakamitsu for her briefing, and we welcome the participation of the permanent representatives of the Syrian Arab Republic and Turkey in this meeting. Madam President, Pakistan condemns the use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, and under any circumstances. We consider the Chemical Weapons Convention a pillar of global arms control and disarmament. Pakistan remains committed to advancing the objectives of the Chemical Weapons Convention and upholding the OPCW's effectiveness, impartiality, and the protection of its verification mechanisms. We support continued efforts for the CWC's universal adherence and its full, effective, and non-discriminatory implementation. We support the stabilization of Syria through an inclusive, Syrian-owned and Syrian-led political process facilitated by the United Nations. Madam President, we must uphold Syria's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. And terrorism must not be allowed to re-emerge from Syria. Terrorists cannot be allowed to have access to weapons of mass destruction, including chemical weapons, in accordance with the provisions of Security Council Resolution 1540. Madam President, on the issue of chemical weapons in Syria, I would like to make the following points. First, we note the commitment of the Syrian interim authorities to secure suspected chemical weapon sites and their cooperation with the OPCW so far. The new Syrian authorities must address long-standing questions and ensure unimpeded access to enable independent and full verification by the OPCW on the elimination of chemical weapons in Syria and any threats of proliferation in compliance with the CWC. Second, we commend the Director General OPCW's engagement with the Syrian caretaker authorities for implementing the mandate of Security Council resolutions. In this regard, we appreciate the Director General's recent visit to Damascus. His efforts have the potential to open a path for renewed, effective, and sustained dialogue with the Syrian interim authorities. We welcome the discussions by the Syrian focal point with the OPCW and the impending physical presence of the OPCW in Syria. All these efforts should be pursued in a transparent and equitable manner. Third, everyone should seize the present opportunity to address outstanding issues in Syria, including those relating to chemical weapons. We urge continued dialogue, cooperation in full compliance with the CWC and Security Council resolutions as a way forward to close the Syrian chemical weapons file as soon as possible. Finally, we remain concerned about aspects of the situation in Syria, in particular the military occupation by Israel and its continuing strikes against Syrian sites and facilities. We urge consensus and unity within the Council in addressing all the outstanding issues relating to Syria and restoring the restoration of normalcy in Syria and the preservation of peace and security in the region. I thank you, Madam President.
Representative of Pakistan for the statement. I give the floor now to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank High Representative Nakamitsu for her informative briefing. Let me begin by reaffirming Slovenia's firm condemnation of the use of chemical weapons anywhere, by anyone, and under any circumstances, and our firm belief in the need for accountability of those who use them. The use of chemical weapons has always resulted in a human tragedy. Nobody knows that more than the Syrian people. And after all this time, justice still awaits to be served. What is more, many questions about the development, production, stockpiling, and use of chemical weapons in Syria remain unanswered. However, in the last few months, we have been witnessing a rapidly evolving political and security situation, which presents new opportunities. In this regard, Slovenia welcomes the recent visit to Damascus by the OPCW Director General and the Investigation and Identification Team. Slovenia remains concerned about the accuracy and completeness of the information about the Syrian chemical weapons program submitted so far. We are especially concerned with the possibility that undeclared chemical weapons production sites may still exist in the country. However, after all the developments in recent months, Slovenia is pleased that an avenue towards Syria's full compliance with the Chemical Weapons Convention is finally opening up. We particularly welcome the participation of the Syrian interim Foreign Minister Al-Shibani at the OPCW meeting held in The Hague earlier this week, where he confirmed his commitment to relevant international norms and to dismantle the remnant stockpiles of chemical weapons in Syria. We encourage the Syrian authorities to seize the historic momentum and fully cooperate with the OPCW to swiftly address the unresolved questions under Syria's initial declaration. Slovenia expresses once again its steadfast support for the work of the OPCW, including its 9-point action plan for Syria. We are confident that only a multilateral approach with the Convention and the OPCW as its cornerstones can prevent further use of chemical weapons and bring to justice those responsible for the attacks with such weapons in Syria and elsewhere. I thank you.
Representative of Slovenia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Thank you, Madam President. Panama
is grateful to Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, for her presentation of the Secretary-General's report on the implementation of Resolution 2118. We're grateful to her also for the most recent update provided by the OPCW on the situation in Syria. We take note of developments reported to date. These can be viewed as important steps in the implementation of this Council's Resolution 2118 and in terms of Syria's fulfillment of its international commitments. However, the report presented today reminds us that more than a decade after Syria's accession to the Chemical Weapons Convention, outstanding issues remain in connection with its initial declaration. That fact emphasizes the importance of continuing to make progress with the full implementation of Syria's commitment in the area of disarmament. We remain concerned because matters remain to be clarified in connection with chemical warfare agents and munitions, and there are sites that require verification. Panama expresses its concern at the imminent risk of chemical weapons proliferation in a situation which remains characterized by political instability and the presence of non-state actors in Syria and the region. The visit to Damascus at the beginning of February by the Secretary General of the OPCW and the recent address by the Minister of the Foreign Affairs of Syria in The Hague this week are important. That address saw him commit to destroying the chemical weapons arsenals built up during the previous regime. And both of these steps are a positive sign in terms of the resumption of dialogue. This is an opportunity that must not be squandered. With this in mind, sustained and effective cooperation with the OPCW is key to guarantee the transparency and credibility of this process. Panama reaffirms its support for the work of the OPCW and for the integrity of the international regime against chemical weapons. We recognise the commitment and professionalism of the expert teams of the Technical Secretariat. They have worked in high-risk conditions to discharge their mandate. We echo the appeal made by Ms. Nakamitsu in December 2024. The international community's unity in the fight against chemical weapons and in promoting a world free of these weapons is very important indeed. Such follow-up becomes all the more pertinent in the current context of Syria as a nation. The country is in a new phase of political transition. Efforts are being made to rebuild institutions and restore the rule of law. However, the rising tide of clashes and tensions across various parts of the country is a source of grave concern. We urge all parties to halt this escalation and to prioritise dialogue and stability as fundamental pillars of peace and national reconciliation. With this in mind, we were delighted to note the recent appointment of a committee to draft a constitutional declaration. We were also delighted by the efforts made within the framework of the National Dialogue Conference. It is undoubtedly positive that this process is focusing on inclusion and the rule of law. That was reflected through the participation of myriad sectors of Syrian society, including academics, constitutional scholars, and women. They all participated in establishing this new normative framework. For this progress to be sustainable, the disarmament process must move forward in parallel with governance and security efforts in the country. Madam President, Panama hails the readiness of Syria's new authorities to continue working with the OPCW and to move forward with complying with its obligations. The total eradication of these weapons is of pivotal importance, not only to guarantee a stable transition, but also to prevent additional risks, including the threat of terrorism. That remains a primary challenge and as yet unaddressed. Syria now has an opportunity to buttress its commitment with peace and international security. These efforts can reaffirm Syria's role as an actor committed to disarmament and to a future of stability and development for its people. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs for your very helpful briefing. The last time this Council met to discuss chemical weapons in Syria, Bashar al-Assad was still in power. 2 days later, he fled, and his brutal regime was overthrown. The fall of Assad marks a new chapter for Syria and presents a golden opportunity to destroy his remaining chemical weapons program, verified by the OPCW. However, the situation in Syria is fragile, and we must make sure we seize this window of opportunity to remove the threat posed by these weapons once and for all. The UK is concerned about recent clashes in Syria, which must not be allowed to escalate into wider violence. We urge all parties to refrain from further violence and exercise restraint at this critical time. The OPCW Director General's visit to Damascus on the 8th of February was an important step forward, and we are greatly encouraged by the commitments already made by the Syrian interim authorities to fully cooperate with the OPCW and to secure chemical weapons sites. The attendance of Syria's interim foreign minister at the OPCW's Executive Council this week was a very significant moment. We welcome his renewed commitments on chemical weapons, including, quote, to put an end to this painful legacy and ensure Syria becomes a nation aligned with international norms. The next step is to support Syria to meet its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention, including to declare and destroy remaining chemical weapons stockpiles working with the OPCW. The OPCW Director General set out the scale of the challenge ahead to the OPCW's Executive Council this week, and this Council has an important role to play in supporting the OPCW's work. First, we underscore the importance of implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention alongside the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 2118. Second, the international community must provide the financial and technical assistance to the OPCW that it needs. The UK has committed more than $1 million to the OPCW Syria missions since the fall of Assad to support their immediate work. Finally, as Syria's interim authorities seek to bring stability to the country and address security threats, it is vital that Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity are respected. That is why we urge Israel to de-escalate their actions in Syria. Such military action risks destabilizing an already fragile security situation. We call on all parties to provide the safe conditions for the OPCW to conduct its work. Madam President, with political will from the new authorities in Syria and from this Council, there is an opportunity to deal with this issue once and for all, and to finally achieve the total elimination of chemical weapons in Syria. We must take that opportunity. Thank you.
And I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the High Representative of Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Nakamitsu, for their informative briefing and commend her for their overall work. At the outset, I wish to express my country's deepest appreciation for the organization of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and its efforts to carry out its mandate impartially, professionally, and in adherence to the highest international standards, with the aim to establish the facts surrounding any use of chemical weapons, including toxic chemicals, for hostile purposes in the case of the Syrian Arab Republic. Madam President, as a country with deep historical and political ties with Syria, Greece will support a fully inclusive Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political transition in the spirit of United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254. Security and prosperity in Syria, as well as its adherence to international law, including UNCLOS, are of key importance for regional stability in the whole Middle East. Therefore, we strongly support the unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Syria. We call on the Council to make use of the momentum created in order to push for a substantial progress on the file of chemical weapons in Syria for the first time since many years. As an issue of priority, we could not stress more the importance of securing the chemical weapons-related locations and materials therein during the transition period. Madam President, I would like to highlight three areas of importance for my country. First, we welcome the recent visit of the Director General of OPCW to Syria as a crucial first step for the re-establishment of mutual trust and cooperation between the organization and the de facto authorities of Syria. We also welcome the recent visit of the Syrian caretaker Foreign Minister, Mr. Al-Shabani, to the OPCW, as well as his commitment to work for the elimination of the remaining chemical weapons in this country. We encourage Syria to engage constructively and in good faith with OPCW Technical Secretariat in order to close the 19 outstanding issues and thus to confirm that it has abandoned the use of chemical weapons and has concluded the total destruction of the stockpiles. These are sine qua non conditions in order for Syria to regain its rights and privilege as the state party to the Chemical Weapons Convention without further delay. Secondly, the latest monthly report to the Director General of OPCW attests a slow progress towards the elimination of Syria's chemical weapons programs. Among others, it is highlighted that due to the continuously evolving situation in the Syrian Arab Republic, no monthly report was received recently regarding activities on its territory related to the destruction of its chemical weapons. Third, Greece condemns in the strongest possible terms any use of chemical weapons by any state or non-state actors anywhere, in any circumstances, and stresses the need to hold all those who would use such weapons accountable. In this way, we support that the OPCW's fact-finding mission should continue to study all available information related to repeated allegations of the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic as an effective means towards the establishment of accountability by the competent teams of OPCW. Madam President, to conclude, Greece calls for the unity of the Council into upholding Resolution 2118 of 2013 and the international norm against any use of chemical weapons. I thank you.
And I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. I also thank High Representative Nakamitsu for her briefing. China's position on chemical weapons has been consistent. We firmly oppose the use of chemical weapons by anyone under any circumstances and for any purpose. It is our hope that a world free of chemical weapons will arrive at an early date. Regarding the Syrian chemical weapons file, the Security Council has adopted unanimously Resolution 2118, setting out the overarching objectives for the destruction of Syrian chemical weapons. This was followed by international cooperation to advance the verification of chemical weapons and their removal and destruction. Positive progress has already been made. Regrettably, due to political factors, such cooperation did not sustain. The current situation in Syria has changed significantly. Under the new circumstances, there is a need to completely and thoroughly resolve the outstanding issues of Syrian chemical weapons and to close the file at an early date. This should be the basic consensus and priority of the international community. Within Syria, there are still terrorist organizations and individuals designated by the Security Council, and the risk of terrorist forces exploiting the chaos to expand positions in the country remains very high. Effectively resolving the Syrian chemical weapons issue will in turn help prevent dangerous chemicals and chemical weapons from falling into the hands of terrorists. Syria is a state party to the Chemical Weapons Convention. The turn of events within Syria, however they may change, does not affect its conventional legal obligations. Under the CWC, Syria undertakes not to use, develop, produce, otherwise acquire, stockpile, or retain chemical weapons or transfer chemical weapons, and Syria should destroy any chemical weapons production facilities it owns or possesses or that are located in any place under its jurisdiction or control. China notes the recent interactions between the OPCW Technical Secretariat and Syrian authorities, and we welcome the OPCW Director General's visit to Damascus. We support the OPCW in fulfilling its mandate in accordance with the Convention and encourage the Technical Secretariat to engage in scientific, open, and transparent cooperation with Syrian authorities. All parties should work together to safeguard the technical nature of the OPCW and avoid politicizing relevant issues. In closing, China condemns the recent massive airstrikes by Israel against Syria. This not only violates Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity, but also results in negative implications on the efforts to resolve the Syrian chemical weapons issue. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor to deliver this joint statement on behalf of the A3+, namely Guyana, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and my own country, Algeria. We thank Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, for the briefing, and we welcome the participation in this meeting of the representatives of the Syrian Arab Republic and Turkey. Madam President, we reaffirm our unwavering commitment in favor of achieving all the objectives of the Chemical Weapons Convention and underline the importance of all states parties to continue to ensure the full, effective, and non-discriminatory implementation of the Convention. While bearing in mind that the threat of the use of chemical weapons remains relevant in the international area, the A3+ reiterates its firm belief that the use of chemical weapons anywhere by anyone and under any circumstances must be condemned. Madam President, we take note of the most recent monthly report, which highlighted the progress achieved in the implementation of the Security Council Resolution 3118 and the relevant decisions of the Organization of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, policy-making organs in relation to the elimination of the Syrian chemical weapons program. The A3+ acknowledge the recent engagement between the OPCW and the Syrian Arab Republic, as highlighted in the recent reports. In this regard, we took note of the Director General's visit to Damascus with a high-level delegation, during which he met with the new Syrian president and the foreign minister. Our group welcomes the designation by the Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs of a new focal point for chemical weapons matters, which constitute an additional positive step forward, facilitating the cooperation between the Syrian authorities and the OPCW. The A3+ acknowledged that Qatar, after close consultation and coordination with the Director General, has agreed to represent the interests of the Syrian Arab Republic before the OPCW until further notice. We commend Qatar's instrumental role as revitalizing channel for engagement and opening further prospect for cooperation. We also welcome the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Syrian Arab Republic in the 108th session of the OPCW Executive Council, held in The Hague from 4 to 7 March this month. We believe that these recent and positive developments can set the stage for the OPCW and Syrian authorities to work together in an open, transparent, and constructive manner toward definitely closing the Syrian chemical weapons file and achieving the Convention's core objectives. In this regard, the A3+ calls upon all actors to respect and uphold Syria's unity, independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Madam President, the A3+ acknowledges the challenges faced by the Declaration Assessment Team in addressing all outstanding issues. We welcome the readiness of the new Syrian leadership to inaugurate a new chapter of open and transparent relation with the OPCW, with a view to settling all the unresolved issues involving quantity of potentially undeclared or unverified chemical warfare agents and chemical munition, which remain a matter of concern. The A3+ welcomes the efforts of the OPCW to maintain engagement with Syrian authorities and to foster conditions for the eventual resumption of the OPCW mission in the Syrian Arab Republic. We also welcome the OPCW Secretariat's 9-point action plan for the Syrian Arab Republic, the A3+ note that the Secretariat's view that the current political situation in the Syrian Arab Republic presents an opportunity to obtain clarifications on the full extent and scope of the Syrian chemical weapons program and to ensure compliance with the Convention. We encourage continuing dialogue between the OPCW and the Syrian Arab Republic on all outstanding issues and look forwards for greater cooperation between the OPCW and the Syrian Arab Republic to resolve outstanding issues and to permanently close this file. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I give the floor now to the representative of France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to thank the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu. I thank her for her briefing. I have 3 comments to make. First of all, since last December, Syria has been in a historic transitional phase. France supports a transitional process which will facilitate the construction of a free, united, sovereign and inclusive Syria in the spirit of fundamental principles underpinning Resolution 2254 of this Council. On the 13th of February in Paris, we hosted a ministerial conference to mobilize the international community. We enjoyed the presence there of Mr. Geir Peterson and Mr. Assad al-Shabani. Second, the political transition in Syria offers a historic opportunity to make progress towards the elimination of the country's chemical weapons program. The toppled regime of Bashar al-Assad had used these inhumane weapons against its own people in at least 9 cases documented by independent investigations. Syria acceded to the CWC in 2013. However, for more than 11 years, the Bashar al-Assad regime obstructed the work of the OPCW. The initial declaration of the Syrian authorities at the time cannot be considered as either accurate or comprehensive in the terms required by the Convention. The most recent report of the OPCW refers to 19 unresolved issues. These issues are sources of serious concern. They involve, inter alia, the chemical weapons stockpiles whose destruction cannot be verified beyond doubt, the risk posed by chemical weapons, and the risk that they or their means of delivery are circulated or that they fall into the hands of non-state actors is an immediate threat for international peace and security. Now, my third point, we must successfully secure and ensure the rapid and verified destruction of Syrian chemical weapons stockpiles. This was affirmed in the declaration of the Paris Ministerial Conference. As such, we salute the commitment made to this end by the transitional Syrian authorities, and we reiterate our support for the OPCW to clarify this uncertainty and urgently respond to the situation. We hail the visit made to Damascus on the 8th of February by the Director General of the OPCW. He was accompanied by the members of the DAT, the FFM and the IIT. We also welcome the participation of the Syrian Minister for Foreign Affairs at the 108th session of the Executive Council held this week, of the OPCW held this week in The Hague. These discussions allowed concrete progress. We are delighted with the deployment in the coming days of the DAT in Syria in order to accompany the transitional Syrian authorities in drafting an initial declaration which will finally be comprehensive and honest. In discharging its obligations under the CWC, Syria will be able to restore the rights and privileges as a state's party that were suspended in 2021. France remains engaged alongside its partners to support the work of the OPCW, enforce the prohibitory norm for chemical weapons and guarantee that these weapons do not go unpunished. Thank you.
For the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to express my gratitude to USG Izumi Nakamitsu for her informative briefing. Last December, we expressed our hope that the historic momentum would be consolidated to ensure the complete destruction of chemical weapons in Syria, as well as accountability for their past use. Recent developments between the OPCW and the Syrian caretaker authorities align with this aspiration. However, internal and regional instability remains as potential obstacles. Let me make the following points in this regard. First, we welcome the progress made between the Syrian authorities and the OPCW in the last reporting period. The visit of the OPCW Director General to Syria last month, along with the caretaker foreign minister's briefing to the OPCW Executive Council on Wednesday, demonstrated Syria's commitment to the full implementation of the Chemical Weapons Convention. The Syrian authorities pledge to cooperate on the OPCW's 9-point action plan was followed by the designation of a point of contact, a meaningful first step in the right direction. We look forward to sustained cooperation and tangible progress forward. Second, all regional actors must refrain from actions that could impede Syria's full implementation of its CWC obligations. While we now have a unique opportunity to address this long-standing issue, recent security developments on the ground risk undermining such efforts. In this connection, we note the OPCW Director General's concern that Israel's airstrikes could not only create a risk of contamination, but also lead to the destruction of valuable evidence for investigations related to past use of chemical weapons. Third, accountability must remain a guiding priority. Beyond the complete destruction of chemical weapons, broader accountability measures must be pursued as part of Syria's political transition. In this regard, the Republic of Korea reaffirms its support for the OPCW Syria teams, including the Fact-Finding Mission, FFM, and the Investigation and Identification Team, IIT. Recent developments do not absolve those responsible for the horrific use of chemical weapons from accountability. We welcome Mr. al-Shara's commitment in providing full support and unfettered access for the investigations conducted by FFM and IIT. In particular, we welcome the decision to grant the IIT access to Syria for the first time since its inception in 2018. Madam President, Syria is now at a critical juncture in its history as it undergoes significant transitions, including the launch of the National Dialogue Conference and the formation of the Constitutional Committee in February. While the political transition may face uncertainties, the imperative to eliminate chemical weapons must not waver. The universal status of the CWC underscores that a world free of chemical weapons is essential for maintaining international security. In this light, we take this opportunity to urge the 4 remaining states not party to the convention, including the DPRK, to accede to the CWC without delay and without preconditions. I'd like to conclude my remarks by reiterating the importance of Syria's continued cooperation with the OPCW in accordance with the 9-point action plan. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for the statement, and I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Denmark. Let me first thank High Representative for Disarmament Affairs Nakamitsu for her very timely and informative briefing, and I welcome the representatives of the Syrian Arab Republic and Turkey in today's meeting. Colleagues, today we discuss chemical weapons in Syria for the first time since the fall of the Assad regime. After years of deadlock, we can now approach this file with a newfound optimism. Now is the time to engage actively and constructively to finally free Syria from these atrocious weapons. Weapons that have tragically killed and injured far too many Syrians. Denmark welcomes signals that the interim government is committed to destroying all chemical weapons in Syria. As we heard this morning from the High Representative, this was reiterated by Syrian's foreign minister's message to the Executive Council of the OPCW in The Hague earlier this week. We strongly support this commitment and acknowledge the special role of the OPCW. In this regard, we acknowledge the invaluable role of Qatar in assisting the Syrian mission to the OPCW over the past months and facilitating the first visit of the OPCW Director General to Syria after the fall of Assad. However, we should not underestimate the scale of the task ahead for the OPCW. More than 100 sites still need to be inspected. This will stretch the OPCW's already limited resources. We urge all donors to scale up support to the OPCW, both financially and operationally, in order to rapidly close this file. We urge the OPCW and Syria to continue and advance cooperation related to Syria's obligations under the Chemical Weapons Conditions and Security Council Resolution 2118. Resolution 2118 is clear. All chemical weapons-related locations must be secured. So too must evidence of the crimes committed by the Assad regime. The victims of the Assad regime's horrific chemical attacks have waited years for justice. Now is the time to show that we have not forgotten them. There can be no impunity for the perpetrators of these attacks. Colleagues, as the new day dawns in Syria, it is important that these weapons do not fall into the hands of terrorist groups such as ISIL. We must all work to ensure that none of these dangerous agents are ever used again by anyone, everywhere, anywhere. The clashes reported in recent days in northeastern Syria are worrying, as are the continued incursions and attacks by the IDF. We reiterate the importance of maintaining Syrian security and independence and territorial integrity. Syria needs stability now more than ever. In closing, we have an opportunity now to make real progress, to destroy the remaining chemical weapons in Syria, to uphold the obligations of the Chemical Weapons Convention, to support the vital work of the OPCW in words and in deeds, and to ensure accountability for the crimes committed. It is incumbent upon all of us, individually and collectively, around this table to grasp it. Count on Denmark's full support to this end. I thank you. And I now resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I congratulate you and Denmark on presiding over the Security Council this month, wishing you every success in your endeavor. Syria stands ready to support your efforts. Please allow me to thank the permanent delegation of the People's Republic of China for presiding over the Security Council last month. Needless to say, I thank Mrs. Nakamitsu, Under-Secretary General for Disarmament Affairs, for her briefing and for the constructive dialogue we had few days ago. Madam President, the Syrian Arab Republic is keen to adopt a new foreign policy grounded on international law and the Charter, and to honor its obligations under international legal instruments it has acceded to. The Syrian Arab Republic thus reiterates its unwavering commitment to cooperate with the OPCW. To this end, the Syrian government has opened a new chapter with the OPCW, one marked by openness, transparency, and constructive cooperation, which helps resolve all outstanding issues, ensure the full elimination of any potential chemical weapons, and close this file once and for all. Israel's aggressions against several military and civilian facilities in Syria on 9 December 2024 complicated the relevant logistical, technical, and practical challenges. Madam President, Syria reiterates its condemnation of the use of chemical weapons anywhere, at any time, by anyone, under any circumstances. As part of the new phase of cooperation with the OPCW, the OPCW Director General, Fernando Arias, and his accompanying delegation visited Damascus on 8 February 2025. He held high-level meetings with the President of the Republic and the Foreign Minister. The talks during the visit were open and positive, and featured a thorough exchange of views to establish new frameworks of bilateral cooperation. Discussions also addressed how to promote cooperation and coordination, including the support and expertise that the Technical Secretariat can provide to help Syria fulfill its obligations under the Convention and restore relations based on mutual trust and transparency. Discussions will continue further within the framework of the OPCW, with the latter being the relevant international forum in The Hague. Madam President, the 108th session of the Executive Council of the OPCW was held 2 days ago with the participation of Foreign Minister Assad al-Shibani. This reflects Syria's interest and commitment to the CWC and its serious desire to honor its obligations under the Convention. In his address to the Executive Council, the Foreign Minister reiterated Syria's commitment to secure any chemical weapons-related materials that could be discovered to ensure they do not fall into wrong hands. He said that the chemical weapons program and the use documented by the OPCW dated back to the former regime era. This means that the new government inherited the legal obligations flowing from these violations and did not cause them. As mentioned the Minister, despite the local and international challenges facing the Syrian government, Syria cooperated with the OPCW and, in close partnership with the State of Qatar, was keen to bridge any gap in dealing with this sensitive file in the days that followed the fall of the regime. And we are grateful for the State of Qatar. The Minister briefed the Council on the first visit by the OPCW Director General and the Investigation and Identification Team to Damascus. He outlined the actions that need to be initiated to implement the Director General's action plan. A national focal point was designated. It held preliminary meetings with the Technical Secretariat's representatives to elaborate a clear and specific plan of action. The Technical Secretariat demonstrated its clear commitment and significant technical support. Madam President, the new Syrian leadership has repeatedly reiterated Syria's full compliance with the CWC and its keenness to seize the moment to embark on a fruitful and constructive cooperation to end the stalled relation with the OPCW, where Syria's privileges and rights as a state party to the Convention were suspended and collective punitive measures were imposed. This restricted Syria's access to chemical products and undermined its efforts to achieve economic development and meet the needs of its people. This happened at a time when Syria was in dire need of international support. Syria is keen today to eliminate the threat posed by prohibited chemical weapons and promote international and regional peace, security, and stability. Syria hopes that these decisions will be revoked, having been taken in a bygone era. We also look forward to reinstating Syria's rights and obligations as a state party to the Convention. These sanctions are part of unjust international measures that were imposed on the Syrian people because of the practices of the obsolete regime. They hinder Syria's recovery and as indicated by the OPCW, affect the organization's capacity to operate in Syria effectively, expeditiously, and smoothly. These sanctions must be thus lifted immediately. In conclusion, Madam President, accountability is critical. We appreciate the work conducted by the OPCW, the Joint Investigative Mechanism, the FFM, and the IIT, and all other mechanisms to hold those involved in using chemical weapons accountable. Syria will continue to strive to deliver justice for victims and establish robust international forums to ensure that these atrocities do not recur in the future. Thank you, Madam President.
Representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Madam President. I am also grateful to High Representative Ms. Nakamitsu for the comprehensive and informative briefing. Madam President, no doubt, follow the Assad regime has marked a new chapter in Syria. Turkey welcomes convening of the National Dialogue Conference and establishment of the expert committee to draft a constitutional declaration. We believe these steps will contribute to an inclusive and representative Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political transition. At this critical juncture, the tension in some parts of the country, as well as targeting security forces, could undermine the efforts to lead Syria into the future in unity and solidarity. Syria's new chapter also presents a historic opportunity for both the country and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to close the chemical weapons file once and for all. From the outset, Turkey has conveyed the international community's concerns to the new Syrian administration regarding the Assad regime's chemical weapons program. We welcome Syria's commitment to fulfilling its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and to cooperating with the OPCW to ensure the complete removal of chemical weapons from the region. We also welcome the visit of OPCW Director General Arias to Damascus on February 8th at the invitation of the Syrian Foreign Minister. This visit holds particular significance as it marks the first time any Director General has visited Syria. The high-level discussions during this visit represent a crucial turning point in establishing direct cooperation between Syria and the OPCW, putting an end to years of stagnation. Turkey also welcomes appointment of a focal point by the Syrian administration and the upcoming deployment of OPCW technical experts to Damascus. We commend the Syrian Foreign Minister's recent participation in the Executive Council at the OPCW headquarters in The Hague. His historic address to the Council underscores Syria's commitment to eliminating the remnants of its chemical weapons and seeking justice for the victims. Once again, this demonstrates that the new leadership is open to engagement and the suggestions of the international community. International support is crucial for the administration in Damascus to develop the capacity needed to fulfill its commitments and ensure peace and stability in the country. Therefore, we call on the international community to support OPCW Technical Secretariat and Syria in completing the destruction of remaining chemical weapons stocks. Turkey stands ready to provide all necessary support in strengthening Syria's capacity to address this chemical weapons file. We are sure that cooperation between the OPCW and Syria will lead to success in fully dismantling the chemical weapons, fostering accountability and transparency, and contributing to regional stability. We also take this opportunity to commend the State of Qatar for temporarily assuming the role of representing Syria's interest in the OPCW. Madam President, preservation of Syria's stability, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity remains our utmost priority. At this critical juncture, this is more important than ever. Unfortunately, Syria continues to face challenges that violate these fundamental principles. First, we condemn Israel's ongoing military advance into Syrian territory and call on the Council to take immediate and decisive action against Israel's expansionist and destabilizing acts, which is against all rules we are committed. Second, a stable and unified Syria requires the eradication of terrorism. There is no place in Syria for Daesh, PKK, YPG, and SDF. Occupation of 1/3 of the Syrian territory by PKK, YPG, SDF poses a serious threat to the country's territorial integrity. Eliminating these terrorist groups is a prerequisite for a peaceful, independent, and unified Syria. Madam President, Turkey strongly opposes the use of chemical weapons under any circumstances. We reiterate our support for the OPCW's efforts to ensure the full and effective implementation of the Convention. The international community's support remains vital for Syria to fulfill its commitments in all key areas, including the elimination of chemical weapons. Only through collective efforts, including full lifting of sanctions and support for the country's reconstruction, we can secure a stable, unified, and peaceful Syria. Thank you.
And I thank the representative of Turkey for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. I now invite the council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on this subject. The meeting is adjourned.